Hello, welcome back to Mia Likes Movies. My name is Mia and I like movies. And guys, you're never gonna believe it. Today we are actually talking about a movie. If you didn't know, the SAG-AFTRA strike is over. And this is because SAG-AFTRA and AMPTP have reached a tentative agreement. And so the strike is over and actors can get back to work. So super exciting. And it also means that I can talk about movies again. So I'm not a scab. Yay for unions, yay for workers' rights, and yay for people getting paid what they deserve. Today we are going to go back to the roots of this channel and talk about something that, if you were here since the beginning, you'll know inspired all of this. Yeah, we're gonna talk about Five Nights at Freddy's. My first ever video on this channel was an hour-long deep dive on the lore in relation to what I thought or predicted would be in the FNAF movie. If you want to watch that, go ahead. It is what it is. It is what it is, and it's long and probably shouldn't be that long, but whatever. I saw the FNAF movie on Halloween with my brother, and I've had some time to think about it and collect my thoughts. I haven't listened to, watched, or read any other reviews on the movie, so these are all my thoughts entirely. And I kind of like separated my thoughts into three categories. I have yays, nays, and okays, and that was my fun way of being like things I liked, things I didn't like, and things that I didn't really have a strong opinion on, or just like objective observations about the movie that I don't feel were particularly or necessarily bad or necessarily good, but just like things that exist about the movie. Does that make sense? I hope it will as we get into it. But before we get into it, like, subscribe, all those things. Do we like this setup? I finally set up my room. If you watched my last video. First of all, let's get the facts of the film out of the way. The Five Nights at Freddy's movie was officially released on Friday, October 27th, 2023, at a theatrical release as well as a streaming release, as it was available to watch on Peacock starting the 27th as well. Personally, I am glad I went to see it in theaters because I don't think I would have liked the film as much if I just sat at home and watched it on my little TV. But I feel that way about like most horror films or action films, so that is not necessarily a criticism against the film. Just my opinion. If you did not know already, the movie is very much obviously based on the video game series of the same name, Five Nights at Freddy's, which was created by Scott Cawthon. Scott Cawthon also co-wrote the screenplay along with Seth Cudback, which if you watched my first video, I think, is hot. He's hot. Seth, if you're watching this, let's connect. I'm on Raya. I might have to bleep that out. Anyways, and Emma Tammy also was one of the writers in the film, and she also directed the film. The movie was produced by indie horror extraordinaire Blumhouse Productions, and currently the FNAF movie is sitting at a nice comfortable 5.5 out of 10 on IMDb. It also has a 30% rotten score from critics on Rotten Tomatoes, but it does have an 88% not rotten score from the audience. That's good, I guess. The film is an hour and 50 minutes long, and it is rated PG-13. Now let's talk about what I think. So my first yay is that the film looked incredible. If you didn't know already, Jim Henson's Creature Workshop or whatever, they did the animatronics and puppets for this film, and they looked so good. The production design overall was so good. Like the Freddy's, the actual like diner looked like a Chuck E. Cheese but better, a more fun Chuck E. Cheese, or maybe just like a rich Chuck E. Cheese. I never went to a rich Chuck E. Cheese, so that's what I'm assuming a rich Chuck E. Cheese looked like. There were small details that were really, really good in the production design, but it also felt cohesive overall. And then, like I said, the animatronics designs not only were just like objectively good, but they felt true to the series and translated what we saw from the games and the books to the screen very well. And the film is also technically set in the early 2000s, and as someone who grew up during that time, it looked it, which is a good thing. Like Mike's house felt so comforting and home-y to me because like that's where I grew up. Like that's what my house felt like those yellow wall, like the yellow ishness vibe of it, like that is my house. And the mall that he worked at, that is the Lehigh Valley Mall. This is my origin story. Actually, the FNAF movie is my origin story. That's not funny. That's just true. So first nay is that objectively it wasn't scary. There weren't like enough scares to make it a horror movie, and like as a FNAF movie, like there weren't a ton of jump scares, like true jump scares. Like all the jump scares that were there, you could feel the build up to it, whereas like the jump scares in the game kind of do just come out of nowhere, which is what makes them scary. And because they don't have that build up, but because it's a movie and you have to have the build up, they weren't that scary. Overall, it kind of just there was like this general sense of unease and discomfort when they were at Freddy's. So it kind of felt more so like a psychological thriller, but the actual like scares to make it a horror movie were very few and far between. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a horror movie. I would call it a psychological thriller. But how many PG-13 psychological thrillers have you seen? Not many, because it's hard to make. Which kind of leads me to my first okay, is that the movie's definitely rated PG-13. Like, I think Mike should have been allowed to say fuck. I mean, look at him. That's a man who says fuck. And like, I know why they did this. It's because FNAF is really appealing to middle schoolers. And if they're intending to make a series of films, they want to get them at a young age so that they'll commit to the series as they age. Like as the films come out, it takes a while to produce films. And so they want to get them young at the beginning of it so that they can grow along with the film. And while I think the older FNAF fans who have been there since 2014 and were in middle school in 2014, like me, would have loved an R-rated gory FNAF movie, that was never going to happen. It was never going to happen. FNAF is for middle schoolers, okay? As much as you want to argue it, it's for middle schoolers. So they're going to obviously go for a PG-13 rating to sell the most tickets. Like, that's what's going to happen. I think the crew did the most with what they could with that rating. The Max and Freddy scene, I still think about. Like, that was genuinely shocking. And like, also, sure, did they solve the plot with the power of crayons and the magic of friendship? Sure. But like, what else were they gonna do? This is also the series that has children's soul juice in it. Are we shocked? Are we surprised? Like, what else were they gonna do? Kill Springtrap? No, not if we want a series of movies. This film was to get the fans and as well as like new young middle schoolers latched in so that they can start diving in more in the future films. Okay, so yay number 2. Cast stacked. The acting was incredible and the directing was incredible too. I thought Emma did a really good job. Speaking of the Max and Freddy scene, how she used shadows to show that she was bitten in half. Spoiler, I guess. The fact that she used shadows to show that was much more, it created distance from the action of Freddy biting her in half, but it also alluded to her being Shadow Freddy, which is kind of confirmed, allowed them to do something gory in a way that is PG-13. So I thought that was really smart. And then also the wide shots that happened with Josh Hutcherson's character, Mike Schmidt, a lot, like when he was in the pool at the mall beating up that guy, or when the crane was like kind of zooming in or out. I can't remember when he was in the dream sequence and he's like holding himself because he like got injured by all the kids. Like, those were great shots. I thought the direction was incredible, and I thought that the shots really did infer to like these larger feelings of discomfort for the audience, but also like distance from the discomfort. So we were able to distance ourselves from like the fact that these kids were being murdered, which I thought was really smart, because if you think too much about it, like that's fucked up, right? Like, kids getting murdered is fucked. But she did all this without sacrificing the plot, because sometimes when you have these really symbolic shots, you can lose plot points, but we didn't. We still got it there. So I thought that was smart. So like, even if you didn't like the content of the movie, like, you can admit that the movie looked good and it was filmed and edited well. Like, it's a good film, even if you didn't like the plot. Nay number 2, we did not get the bite of 87 or the bite of 83. That's all I had written for this one. But like, when are we gonna see it? Like, that's what we were all looking for and we didn't get it. I don't think what happened at the beginning of the film was the bite of 87. I think that was just the last security guard, which was not the bite of 87. That's just my opinion. I don't think we'll get it until the last movie. I think we might get the bite of 83 the next movie, and I don't think we're going to get the bite of 87 until the very last movie, because they know that's what we all want. Okay, number 2, according to like FNAF book fans, the movie followed or alluded to a lot of the lore of Silver Eyes trilogy. And you know, since FNAF 1, the video game had very little actual plot, the smart move would be to adapt the books to the movies instead of the games. And this is what it seems like they're doing from what I've seen online. And honestly, it really doesn't make sense to adapt the games because plot-wise, they're a mess and you kind of need a plot to make a movie. I don't know if that's a controversial opinion, but maybe it is. And not only that fact, but also the fact that adapting the books means that they're gonna get more book sales in addition to a cohesive story. So it's kind of like a win-win all around. And I like to think that the books are Scott's way of essentially starting over with the plot and lore of FNAF, since with the games he kind of just made it up as he went, since he never expected the games to grow into what they are. So I have no problem if they are focusing on book lore. It's not going to make me buy or read the books, but I think that as far as getting better films, if they're going to choose to adapt more of the books or more of the games, I'll be glad to see the books adapted more. So yay number 3 is I thought the script overall was pretty cohesive, which I was not expecting since it's Five Nights at Freddy's, and when has it ever been cohesive? You know, besides a few minor things, which I've kind of talked about already, and my next nay kind of talks about it, but I thought the script had really strong characters, which is important to me. I like to see strong characters, since we get a lot of strong characters in the games, since the plot is all over the place. They were strong characters and they had strong motivations, which helped to guide the plot along. It felt like the characters were really active in the story and not like the plot was happening to the characters, which I feel is usually what happens when you have like a horror movie or like a film when the main conflict is with ghosts or like a possession, is that things kind of just happen to the main character and then at the end it all sorts itself out. That wasn't the case here. The characters, specifically Mike and Abby and Vanessa, were really active in the story and in the plot. I think adding the missing brother for Mike gave him motivation to continue working at Freddy's, because I think I can't remember who brought it up, but someone was like, why does the person in the games come back for nights 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Like, why do they keep coming back? And I think giving Mike the missing brother and the connection in the dream sequence with the missing children gave him that motivation. So we couldn't sit there and be like, why are you still going there? Go get another job. Like go work at Burger King or something, right? So I thought that was really smart. It also gave him inner conflict. It's always so much more interesting when a character has internal conflict in addition to the external plot conflict happening. I thought the script was kind of good. I don't know. They kind of ate with that one. Not gonna lie. This kind of brings me though to my next critique, which is nay number 3, is that I wanted more Matthew Lillard. He was barely in it. He was so good, but we only saw him like right at the beginning and right at the end, and it felt like with this character specifically, the writers were almost depending on us, the audience, to know that he was Afton all along, and for us to know that he was the one. Why am I holding my mic like this? For the audience to know that he was the one stealing the kids. Because if I didn't know who William Afton was and I didn't know that's who he was supposed to be, I would have been really confused when he just kind of showed up at the end in that bunny suit. Like I would have just not, like, there were no real clues throughout for us to infer that it was him, besides the fact that he was the only real like main male character besides Mike. So when the kids were like, some creepy guy took your brother and some creepy guy took us, you're like, well, what creepy guy did we see in this film? Oh right, that one guy at the beginning. But besides that, there was really nothing else in the script for us to be like, oh yes, that guy took the kids. If the general public just walked in there and knew nothing about FNAF, they would be confused as hell. The only reason why I knew was because I know too much about this series for someone who has had sex before. And then the last point I want to make, which is my last okay, is that one of the biggest complaints people have about this movie is that it's fan service. Well, duh. I hope it is. Like, who else are they making this movie for if it's not for the fans? Can you imagine if they didn't keep the fans in mind when making this? All those cameos would not have been in there. The 8-bit intro probably wouldn't be a thing. The Living Tombstone song at the end would not have been there. Like, we would have hated it. I don't think there's anything wrong with fan service in movies, especially movies that are adaptations of different medias, especially video games. And here's why. As players, of video games. We are a part of the story of the game as we play as a character in the game. That is why immersion is so important to video games, because you as the player have to be immersed and therefore connected to the story in order to continue playing the game. That's how it works. That's what I learned in college in my video game class, okay? I'm using my degree. If the immersion of the video game is good, then we feel like we are contributing to the story. That is not true with movies. We are not necessarily active participants in the story. We are passively participating in the story as we are watching what happens in the movie. But with video games, we are actively making choices. We are actively doing the things. When you are adapting a video game to a movie, that inherent immersion of video games cannot translate to the movie. They are two different mediums of storytelling. By providing this fan service in video game adaptations, the creators are honoring that part of the game player relationship. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I liked the fan service. Sure, most of the movie I was going like this to my brother. Did you see that? But that was fun for me, you know? Like, I had a good time watching it. And if you have a problem with the fan service, then you're probably not a fan. And maybe you shouldn't have watched the movie. I don't know. Then why are you going to see it? To make fun of it? Sure. You know who makes fun of FNAF the most? FNAF fans. You watch MatPat's videos, right? I think these two statements from Rotten Tomatoes sums it up the best. The overall consensus from critics is that the film is, quote, loaded with Easter eggs. Five Nights at Freddy's may be fun to watch for fans of the game, but most viewers of any other persuasion will find this adaptation muddled and decidedly unscary, end quote. But audiences think, quote, it perfectly captures the lore and spirit of the source material. Five Nights at Freddy's is a long-awaited treat for fans of the games, end quote. In my opinion, if you liked the games, or if you liked watching Markiplier playing the games, or you just sometimes watch the game theory videos, or you like Josh Hutcherson, watch it. It's just a fun little movie, and you get to see Josh Hutcherson do what he does best. Just be a fun little guy. But if you have zero context for FNAF at all, or you're like a horror movie fan, maybe don't see it. Don't like run to see it. If you are like, well, I'm curious, put it on Peacock on your laptop while you're making dinner. You specifically, you're probably going to get the same amount out of it than going to the movie theater. But if you do want to see the movie and you're like, do I stream it or do I go see it in theaters? Go see it in theaters. It's going to be a much better experience. Just don't cosplay the marionette like I did, because the marionette is not in the movie and you look like a total nerd.
Mia, we have to leave. The movie's over.
No, Markiplier didn't show up yet. It's not over yet. Anyways, that's it for today. Let me know what you think about the FNAF movie, if you saw it, and if you didn't see it, are you gonna watch it eventually? And do you want to see the sequel when it comes out? I want to see the sequel. I'll be there at every single one. Well, thank you again for watching. As always, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and I will see you next week with another Let's Play. Bye.